On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, what players in 2022 might have reduced roles in 2023? Plus, our final show with our What Happened To series featuring Nelson Agholor and Andre Dillard. All that and more on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcoming Eagles fans to a Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. As always, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Louie DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. Gino, we're going to continue our What Happened To series today with Nelson Agholor and Andre Dillard, two first-round picks from the past that the story is definitely very different. One player had more success, but equally as confusing with the way things went, and the expectations definitely were not met to a degree, at least for the long-term future of what they were supposed to be, for 5+ years. But we're going to get into that in segments 2 and 3, but one of our good friends from Locked On Cowboys, and I know, yes, Locked On Cowboys, but we are good friends. Marcus Mosher does some incredible work over there, Landon McCool as well. Gino, they were talking today about what Dallas Cowboys they want to have a reduced role from 2022 to 2023, a player that maybe had a role that was just too much for them. They were a full-time starter, they got the ball way too much, or they had to play way too much at a position that they didn't fit, or just, for one reason or another, they're more of a role player or backup. And I started to think about that from an Eagles perspective because I think it's different with Philly. Like last year, this team was just so damn good at pretty much everything they did on offense, throwing the football, running the football, not turning the ball over, pass protection, run blocking, on defense, forcing turnovers, sacks. Pretty much everything. So are there players, maybe it's not for like lack of production, but maybe it's because of new players you added, or are there players that had a role last year on this team on either side of the ball that this year you want to see maybe their responsibilities are reduced?
I think when you look at the defense, there's an approach that you have to take on the defensive line, and that's the proactive approach, right? And I think you can look at Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham even, especially when you bring in Nolan Smith, especially when you bring in Jalen Carter, you know what the inevitable is. Within 1 or 2 years, both of those guys are not going to be Philadelphia Eagles. Fletcher Cox now is on his third contract in the last 3 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? After getting cut on his long-term deal, re-signing a 1-year deal last year, signing back this year, and then Brandon Graham, just about the same thing. These guys are on their way out. They're still going to have good minutes in their legs, and there's a reason a lot of these veterans came back because they know what the end goal is. That's to go and win a Lombardi trophy. But at the same time, you have to play those guys. You have to play the Jordan Davises of the world. You have to play the Jalen Carters on the interior, even the Milton Williams, Lou. Milton Williams should get an increased role because Fletcher Cox should play no more. And to benefit Fletcher and the defensive line as a whole, he should be a 45 to 47% snap guy, not even 50-50. He should be in there, especially on situations in third down pass rush, maybe give him 1 or 2 first or second downs every other drive. But you have to keep his legs fresh. And how do you do that? You bring on the explosive youth in Jalen Carter and Milton Williams and let those guys go and get the experience that they are going to need. And hopefully right away, Jalen Carter can have that impact. But on the edge, when you talk about Nolan Smith, is he going to need a little bit more experience when it comes to playing at the NFL pace to inevitably take Brandon Graham's job? And I would like to know sooner rather than later, so you know the trajectory that you have to get him on for his path to success within 2 to 3 years when BG is gone.
And I think when the season starts, Gino, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham will have a bigger role. But as you're saying, the more the season goes on and Jalen Carter gets his footing and, Nolan Smith, unless they just blow up on the scene from the jump.
And Kentavious Street too, right?
Kentavious Street, yeah. I mean, he had a career year last year when it comes to pass rush production in New Orleans. And I like Ajomo as well in the 7th round. Who knows what he could be in this rotation. So, yeah, I think Fletch and Brandon Graham, I mean, these are two players coming off career years. Fletcher Cox last year had the best year I think he's had since, from a pass rushing standpoint, 2018 probably. And Brandon Graham, he never had a year as good as he did last year. But why did they perform so well at such an efficient rate? Gino, honestly, the reduced role they had even last year, I think helped them a lot, keeping them fresh, especially Fletch. 2 years ago, he had to carry the load, up front. Him and Javon Hargrave, they did not have the depth in 2021 they did in 2022. This year, you have even younger players with even more upside. And yeah, with the way the defense is going, I agree that it's less about production for Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham versus some other players we could mention, but because of their age, because we want them to still be productive this year, and we need to find out what we have in the future with these young guys. For all those reasons, I think the roles will be even more reduced this year, for sure. But I think it benefits everybody for it to be that way. And again, it's not like they're going to be backups that barely play. They're both going to have huge roles. It's why the Eagles were adamant about bringing both of these leaders back. They're on the field. And the thing is, last year they embraced that kind of reduced role, Gino. And, Brandon Graham was a starter for a decade, and last year he was a rotational DE3. So I'm not worried about them embracing that as the year continues on. When it comes to the production, that's when you can get more into the Quez Watkins discussion. I want him to bounce back, but they do have another option that I think is an upgrade over Zach Pascal and Olamide Zacchaeus. And another receiver I'd like to see a reduced role is Britton Covey at the return spot. I just don't know if they have another good option. It feels like they're almost stuck despite all the athletes they have. You'd hope at least one of these running backs or receivers could do this and not have it be Covey, but I think he probably won't have a reduced role. We'll see.
I think you're going to see spread across the bottom 3 receivers more equal production. And I think it's going to be because Olamide Zacchaeus comes in here and he takes away that surefire number 3 role.
More than Pascal did.
Yes, exactly. That Quez Watkins has. And even if Britton Covey is the number 5 guy or one of those guys that's a long shot, let's say Devin Allen works his way onto the roster, ends up being the return guy.
Right, there's so many guys with 4.3, 4.4 speed. How did one of these guys, part of it, and I think you would agree, is issues with developing with the coach.
Yeah, your special teams coordinator isn't the greatest, right? But
they signed him to a contract extension, which is I just disagree with, but as do you.
We'll have some fun talking about Michael Clay this year, and a lot of it is going to come down to the jobs that are given out at the back half of this roster, and could it be Britton Covey and you talk about the back half of the cornerback roster as well, and safety roster and linebacker, but what position could have the most turnover when it comes to where the X's and O's shift, who gets the more production? I think wide receiver has a real chance.
Outside of the top 2 guys, 100%. Gino, I think other pass catchers too, like tight end. Jack Stahl is always going to have a role with his run blocking, but he was, I think, especially when Dallas Goedert went down, you don't want Jack Stahl to be your number 1 tight end. Even though he improved as a pass catcher last year, he should not be getting the role he had. You hope that a Tyree Jackson can stay healthy and show some flashes he did 2 summers ago, or a Jack Arnold is a veteran that has some production in the past. Or Dan Arnold, or Grant Calcaterra, one of those 3 players that I think are better pass catchers, could definitely step up so you can use them more in 12 personnel. I think that's another player I'm looking at. Hopefully, not because Stahl was terrible last year. I thought he definitely improved, and he's a nice young player, but I think you definitely want more at that spot.
And if you had TJ Edwards returning, let's say, and Kaiser White, would you want any of them to go back in production? No. I think at the safety spot as well, no. But when you look at the current state of the roster, it's margins, right? It's where you want to see.
That's a good thing, Gino. We don't have a lot of players get him out of the lineup. Every other year we've done the show together, we could have a few. Even Quez, I'm I think he's going to bounce back. Me more than most, but there's not a lot of guys I feel pretty negative about on this team.
And even the guys that we want to take a reduced role, I would say outside of Quez, you're a little more favorable on Quez than I am, but I don't think any of those guys are guys that you win games in spite of. I think they're all
Right.
players that you can win with. And even at times last year, Brandon Graham came up in huge
Brandon Graham was
moments.
huge last year. He had the best year of his career.
He could still be a guy that you win games because of. And could he
Cox
be
and Graham
that
has
player
nothing
that-
to do with production.
No, not at all. I think the only production ones are on the offensive side of the ball.
Yes, I agree.
Your tight end, your second tight end who's going to be receiving passes, and your third or fourth option when it comes to the wide receiver game. Whoever inevitably takes that fifth spot will be the best special teams player. We know that.
Yeah. I agree. All right, Gino, let's continue our What Happened To series coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. First, today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's right, up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And for me, I bet on the Phillies a lot this year, and it has not won. Let's hope. We have a lot of time still. Last year, there's so many ups and downs with the MLB season. I thought the Phillies were dead in the water, and they made the World Series. Let's see if they can bounce back this year. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up today and get that $1,000 bonus bet back if your first bet does not win. Don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet when you join FanDuel. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission. All right, Eagles fans, we're continuing on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Louie DiBiase joined as always by Gino Camilleri. Thanks to the everydayers for making us your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. We're back to Monday through Friday starting next week with training camp. Crazy enough, Gino, right around the corner. Until then, though, we're still taking a trip down memory lane. We've been doing our What Happened To series over the last 2 weeks, getting into some young players in Eagles history that didn't pan out for one reason or another, but not your typical, big name guys that we discuss, like what happened to Carson Wentz and, what happened to Danny Watkins and why Nnamdi Asomugha didn't work out. You know what I mean? It's more of the, like we talked about Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas and Travis Fulgham, Dorial Green-Beckham. Yesterday it was Jay Ajayi and Corey Clement after Super Bowl 52 and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Today we are going to talk about 2 first-round picks, but because of different reasons, although they never met the expectation they had when they were originally selected, even though neither one were like the biggest busts in franchise history, neither one, again, were the player you probably were hoping when you took them on day one. It's Nelson Agholor and Andre Dillard. And Nelly's the one we'll start with because it's such a confusing, I don't know. It's always interesting to see. I think everybody's different with Agholor, his legacy in Philadelphia, but it's definitely a mixed bag because he was so terrible. He was a lot like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside his first 2 years, 2015 and 2016, where the minute he was out there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid can't play. It's a disaster. He can't catch. He can't separate. Whatever that player was at USC, that's not this guy. And then he has the best year of his career in a Super Bowl, and he was the best receiver, I think, in the Super Bowl with 9 catches. And then in 2018, he stepped up in the clutch too in that playoff run. 2019, he goes back to who he was the first 2 years. It's just such in the meme, of course, everybody remembers him for, even though I think he was a Super Bowl hero. It's just such a interesting, relationship between Nelly and the city of Philadelphia.
Going into that draft, it was always that one pick I would see in mocks, and it's like, it makes sense. It seems a little forced. It seems a little early. He seems like a surefire second-round guy, but you're going to use a first-round pick.
That's the thing, though. Even when they drafted him, even though I liked him, I never thought he was like this elite prospect. I always thought he was a day 2 pick, too.
And the guy who picked him, and of course his Pac-12 bias. And he inevitably picked a guy who was brought in to be a number 1 who never had the skill set to be a number 1.
No, he was a number 3 at best, and luckily, he was a great number 3 in a championship season.
He was, and outside of that, though, Lou, it was very bad in very big moments when you needed him, man. And even before the Super Bowl year and after. That's why it's a conundrum. Why does that happen twice? It's tough to catch lightning in a bottle once, but this guy's poor play
I think
came back
it was
to
a
haunt
mental
him
thing.
multiple times. It had to.
It was absolutely a mental thing. Nelson Agholor was a very inconsistent player because I just think he got in his head. He said that after that Seattle game in 2016 when he dropped multiple
when he couldn't
passes.
line up onside.
Yeah,
right?
and he's literally sweating through this interview after the game. He's like, I just can't get out of my own head. And I think that's what happened. The pressure was off him in 2017 because they brought in Alshon Jeffrey. They bring in Torrey Smith. They put him in the slot in a role that, he wasn't asked to do as much, and it was easier. It fit his skill set more. Doug Peterson did a great job of saying, okay, what does this kid do best? And I'm only going to use him in that way. And he became a really good player. Then again in 2019, when the expectations were there, when Deshaun Jackson went down, when Alshon Jeffrey went down, when he had to be the guy again, mentally it got in his head and he started dropping balls again. I think that's exactly what it was. And when you're a player in Philadelphia, you have to be mentally strong. I mean, look at Carson and Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz. I mean, it's a tough place to play. And for some people, it's not for everybody. At least he, though, saved his best for the year that meant the most.
It definitely is one of those stories that you look at and you say, the media probably did a little bit of harm to said player and Nelson Agholor.
And it's hard for me to talk trash because that would happen to me if I was. I mean, it would probably happen to a lot of people.
Absolutely, and no fault to Nelly in his own right. And it was a tough situation coming in because this is off the back of losing Jeremy Maclin and losing Deshaun Jackson and.
Yeah,
you could have brought Jeremy Maclin back, but Chip Kelly didn't want to pick up the phone just 20 minutes earlier.
And Nelly, I think, at the Combine, Gino got a Maclin comparison with that graphic, so
it was a very Maclin-esque pick, but with Maclin, you saw that number one ability playing in the SEC for Missouri, right? It was clear, but playing at USC and Nelson Agholor's there, and I believe Juju Smith-Schuster was there as well. Like, they had a lot of offensive firepower, but none of those guys were true number one wide receivers coming out of the gate, right? And that's what he was drafted to be. And would have Byron Jones been a way better pick? 100%. The dude jumped out of the gym. The Eagles could have used him at corner, takes him away from a division opponent. But when you had that Super Bowl year and then you fall back to who you were, not even to an average level of play, Lou, but to a level of play that cost you games. And we talked yesterday about the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside drop in that Detroit Week 3 game. Well, the game that preceded that was against Atlanta, and Nelson Agholor famously alligator armed that ball.
I know. I will say, though, I don't want to skip over the 2018 season because he almost had as many receiving yards as 2017. Like, he stepped up big. That touchdown against Houston and that do-or-die game was huge. Caught a touchdown against Washington in the game to clinch the playoffs. So, I did think Nelly for 2 years and 2 very important years was huge. And that's why I don't love when he gets jumbled in with Jalen Reagor and JJ. Like, yes, from a perspective
that bad.
Right. Again, somebody can't have 9 catches for over 70 yards in a Super Bowl for you. Make the play he did on 3rd down where he literally spins off a tackle and converts the play. That insane back shoulder catch on the right sideline. You cannot put that player in the same breath as those. I mean, he's a legend. You got to, to me, prioritize kind of like with Nick Foles and Corey Clement. No, to me, man, anybody that is that good in a Super Bowl, is Corey Clement a legend in Philadelphia? I think he is. Okay. Anybody in that Super Bowl that was that good is a legend to me. So I think I prioritize quality over quantity with Agholor from a perspective of him being a first-round pick and the whole 5 years, the resume. Yes, in that way, it definitely was not a great run, but just the quality of what he did in 1 or 2 years is at least what I view it as. But it was definitely an interesting, weird run. And then he goes on to Vegas after 2019, Gino, and he has 800 yards. It's just it's a roller coaster ride for that. He's kind of the Nick Foles of receivers.
He's not had a half bad career since he has left Philadelphia.
Yeah, I would take his career any day.
I want to ask our listeners, and I want to ask you this, and it should be the same answer across the board. What was the play that you knew in 2017 that this Nelson Agholor is different?
Was different?
It should be the same answer.
I mean, the first touchdown against Washington was there, but I think it was the Arizona play.
The Arizona play where he put that defensive back on skates.
It was Budda Baker.
That was Budda?
That was Budda.
No, was that Budda? That must have been Budda.
That was a young rookie Budda Baker. Yep, over the top.
Yep, they put it up there, man. He gets it. It's a little underthrown.
And he falls back. I mean, like, that's a confident Nelson Agholor.
Man,
Like, that's not the 2016 kid.
It was a different player, and when you saw that, it's like, man, this is what they talk about when you have to put players in a position to succeed, because no fault to him, man. 2015, 2016, it was so rough, but mentally he wasn't the number one receiver, especially coming off of the back of maybe the second best duo that we have seen in the last 2 decades, right, with Deshaun and Jeremy Maclin.
Right.
Doug Peterson come in after Chip Kelly drafts him, and 2 different coaching staffs, 2 different offensive coordinators. And then in 2017, when he's put in a position to succeed, you see what happens. And I think you have to respect the 2017 and 2018 version of Nelson Agholor.
But you're right, though. Then, like,
the confidence went away. Still get the memes off.
I know. 2019, though, you could see, like, that confidence was gone. I mean, I remember the play he drops against the Patriots where Wentz throws up another prayer, and it went right to him in the back of the end zone. Agholor drops it. I mean, it was a tough, like, the way his body was falling was really hard, but it's right in his hands, and then he instantly pretends he's hurt. That was tough. I think that's when he lost the city again. They're like, oh, great, this guy's back. So, definitely a very interesting career for Agholor, but I'll always appreciate what he did with the Eagles. Gino, to wrap up the show, I want to talk about another first-round pick that we don't talk about as much, like, oh, that pick was just terrible, even though it just did not work at all. For other reasons, this one also isn't talked about in the same way, you know, we talk about Rager and Watkins and Marcus Smith. It's Andre Dillard. And this is a player in 2019 that they not only they selected in the first round, but they traded up for, and they actually took him ahead of other offensive linemen that have been much better. He was supposed to be the heir apparent to Jason Peters' decade-plus run at left tackle, but because Jordan Mailata absolutely blew up, we really don't care that this pick didn't work out. But the pick did not work. I mean, he was injured. There were reports that the Eagles thought he was soft early in his career. He didn't really cross-train well, playing right tackle when they needed him. He was a good backup, I think, the last 2 years. But that pick definitely is a bad one we don't discuss a whole lot because they didn't really need him.
The equivalent of Nelson Agholor's play in Seattle when he couldn't line up onside and Zach Ertz scored that touchdown was the entire Minnesota Vikings game when Andre Dillard played right tackle, where he got obliterated every single snap, and it was
the Seahawks game too, man. It was just terrible.
It was clear that he wasn't made for Jeff Stoutland's offense. And Lou, that draft was weird because it wasn't expected that Andre Dillard was going to be in that position, right? When Howie Roseman talked about that, they were kind of shocked that he was on the board. Was there a miscommunication between Jeff Stoutland and Howie Roseman?
I was going to say it's a weird,
right?
It's odd that they missed on that because normally Stoutland and Howie are so in sync and they rarely miss on picks. Even if it's not like an amazing player, the lineman's like even Jack Driscoll, like, you know, that's a solid rotational backup you have. I mean, they normally don't miss.
Why it was weird too was because when you look at Stoutland and what he wants in these offensive linemen, it's run first and then I'll develop you as a pass rusher, right? Andre Dillard never ran the football.
Well, I think they really liked how much, right? I mean, you said it during the live show that year when they took him. We loved how experienced he was at Washington with his pass protection at Washington State. He was in Mike Leach's system, I think, at that point, and they threw a lot. So they I think, liked that he was very experienced more in pass protection. Stoutland said, I can develop the rest. And I think they misevaluated saying he is doing this so much in pass pro that we think he can, you know, play right tackle too if we need to. But it's really hard to project what a guy is mentally, and I just think Dillard could not pick that up, and he felt the pressure. But I will say, at the same time, like, he was a solid left tackle backup the last 2 years. I mean, he got a good contract this year, and he's going to start.
He's going to be the starting left guard, I would say, in Tennessee. And you have to respect the moments that he popped in there the last 2 years. And I think Jeff Stoutland even gave him his flowers over the last couple seasons of how he really changed his body.
Yeah, he did rebound.
Came in as like a young, doughy kid, and then he comes out and he's like 330 pounds and all muscular over the last 2 years. And you got to say hats off to him for going and getting that bag. But I really do think it comes down to maybe they evaluated it backwards. Maybe they put so much stock into the pass protection aspect of it that they thought they could teach this bully mentality. And it's tough coming from Jason Peters to be his heir apparent, because before Jason, it was Trey Thomas, who's just as a mean SOB as Jason Peters is. And how do you follow that up? Well, you take a guy who he outpass set his run blocks basically 6-1 at Wazoo, played in the air raid, never played in a basic power counter type of offense up at Wazoo. And
do you think maybe like things were just too simple at Washington State for him? I mean, maybe that's part of what it was. Like
when you look at that type of offense, it's so pass based and it's so fast
and like repetitive too, right?
Right. Yeah, you're more like vertical setting where you're just scooting back more than opening.
Well, it's probably
up
why he couldn't anchor, man. He sucked against the bull rush.
Yeah, he couldn't anchor
years.
because he couldn't set for 3 seconds. It's more of a 1.5 to 2 seconds. I'm getting the ball out of my hand. I know the designed read. I know where I'm going against this defense.
Yeah.
And at the same time, what would have been the other pick? Would it have been Titus Howard? Would you have been walking away with that guy who's been better and a more angry guy and who's more of a ball of clay? But you
again,
did
sometimes bad things can come, or great things can come from mistakes, like the Jalen Hurts pick. It found you a franchise quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you don't take Andre Dillard, he doesn't get hurt, and Jordan Mailata doesn't get these reps for you to discover, oh my gosh, we have our new Jason Peters. Because if you take Titus Howard, he's a good player. He probably stays healthy, and he's your guy, and he's good, but he's no Jordan Mailata. You probably don't ever have Mailata. So in a way, that's like the silver lining of even in these mistakes, you learn lessons, and sometimes you stumble upon the right. It's the whole analogy. Like sometimes the girl you don't think is the one, and she takes off the glasses, and boom, there she is. And that, so with the Dillard pick, I think we all don't really take it in like a negative way because we know it brought us number 68.
It'll be one of the trivia questions probably 10, 15 years down the road that you're sitting in a bar somewhere, like maybe in Fishtown, right? And they're like, who was the Philadelphia Eagles first round pick in 2019? You're like, who the hell was the Eagles first round pick in 2019? And it'll be Andre Dillard. And that draft, you were hoping for one of those interior defensive linemen. I think Jeffrey Simmons, coming off that injury, would have been a nice little get there.
2019 Lou was obsessed with Josh Jacobs. That's all I wanted.
Josh Jacobs was there too. I mean, John Gruden thought that the Philadelphia
thought that's what the pick was
to get him. They did.
Yeah.
Would that have been a better pick over Andre Dillard? Like you said, the butterfly effect, you can't look back.
It's tough.
It's a great lesson in team
at
building,
the time.
as we said yesterday.
Right, and that's the thing, Gino. I will never, even if the pick doesn't work, I'm never going to fault a team for wanting their left tackle of the future
never,
or running back.
Ever.
So even if I don't like the lineman over the skill position player, I'm always going to understand it. Like last year, Jordan Davis, was he my favorite pick? No. I wanted Kyle Hamilton over him, but I'm never going to anymore. Knowing the track record of this team and their history over the last 20 to 30 years, I'm never going to fault that. Like even Cam Jurgens in the second round, I wanted Tariq Woolen, but
Christian Fulton, right?
That year too, I wanted, there's so many instances of this. I wanted Asante Samuel Jr. or Tyson Campbell or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. But when this team goes line, now I'm like, I trust you. Just do it. This is one of the rare times it didn't work out with Dillard, but it worked out another way because you got Jordan Mailata. So, 2 first-round picks, Agholor and Dillard.
Fourth-round comp pick, and who knows what you can get out of that, man. It's
that too. You're getting a nice comp pick, and Dillard was he wasn't one of the biggest, but like Marcus Smith and Danny Watkins, they just could not play at the NFL. Dillard's been solid, and now, like you said, I mean, I think they're thinking about moving him to guard, right, left guard,
especially after they took.
They took a tackle.
They took Skronsky.
They did take Skronsky. So
that'd be a nice little 1-2 there. And I think Andre did a very good job adapting in the last 2 years, right? He figured out what this offense needed.
I think both these first-round picks did, Gino. There's a lot of guys when it feels dead in the water so early on, it can start to spiral and it ball up. And with Agholor and Dillard, at least they never met the expectations of a day one selection and what Philadelphia wanted them to be. But I think both these guys a testament of overcoming adversity for sure, and at least making something of their careers.
Andre Dillard could have laid down and died after that performance.
Same with Nelly, man. Both these guys,
100%. And you have to give respect to those two. And I think it's a big respect to the guys in the building too when it comes to development, because the people on the outside, right, we look back, I wanted this guy, I wanted this guy. Well, if you let things play out and you let the cards kind of fall into place and let the cookie crumble, as people say,
Yeah.
You might walk away with an Andre Dillard who, at the end of the day, he helped you win games last year. I don't think you come out of some of those situations when your offensive line does take some knocks. Landon was down at times for you last year, and you needed him. When Jordan Mailata goes down at times, you needed him in situations. Yeah. That's a reason why they didn't just go out and trade him for nothing.
It's a compliment to the coaches. I think, honestly, Gino, sometimes it's probably harder to develop a player like that that's gone through 2 years of baggage and their confidence is shot and, they don't feel like they are what they once were. I think that's a harder player sometimes to develop something out of than like the kid coming out of school and he's, a top pick and all the confidence in the world. Like a Dillard and Agholor, to get the 2017 and 2018 version of Nelly out of him, to get the 2021 and 2022 Dillard out of him, that's a testament to the coaches because that can't be easy.
Not at all. And it's a testament to the culture as well. And there's a reason
absolutely.
Jeff Stoutland makes as much money as he does. And Nelson Agholor has a Super Bowl ring, man. And you got to respect those guys. And this is a great exercise. I think it's cool to do it every single year, too. And we can even look back, like what happened at the 2015 cornerback room. Why did that go so awry?
Oh, there's so many ways we could do this for months.
What happened in 2012? I think we can continue to just go down that. But that was fun, the last 4 shows.
Yeah, absolutely. So we enjoyed it. Hopefully everybody else did as well. But we do have a training camp coming up soon to look forward to right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. So subscribe to the show Monday through Friday. We've got you right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the Everydayers for making us your first listen. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.